Hey folks, Why Would You Ask That is a podcast that answers some of the weirdest questions. A lot of those are inappropriate for some listeners. If you're squeamish, easily disturbed, or just having a bad day, this may not be for you. But if you've got to know the answers like we do, stay tuned.
Why would you ask that? My name is M, they, them, and
Karen, she, her, and
Remy, he, they.
today, it's Black History Month. Wah, 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 wah.
woo, 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 woo.
So, just to preface this, none of us are black.
No, but
No.
we do appreciate Black culture and everything that Black people have given to the world.
Figured it might be important to do that before we start dropping some history.
Yes. Yeah, we are not any form of authority on Black history or Black culture, but we definitely appreciate, and Remy has done a lot of research. So, yeah, we do recommend listening to any form of podcast. Hold on. I think I know someone.
Oh, are we giving recommendations up front? Because I got
Why
some.
not?
Yeah, do it.
Hit us.
Okay. You should go listen to Beyond Black History Month. These are podcasts. Beyond Black History Month, or Redacted History, or Black History for White People over on Spotify or wherever you listen to things. Or on TikTok, you can go listen to Dara Star or Blackout with 2Ks. Both of those people are good. There's a lot of people on TikTok. I watch a lot of people. Those are the only two off the top of my head that I can immediately think of because I wasn't prepared.
Oh, you. I had to look them up, so I'm glad that you have it off the top of your head. Immediately, my brain is like, that beautiful woman that crochets and tells me.
Oh, that lady's nice.
Yeah, so she's Empress Onyx, and her podcast is Almost Random, and she's amazing. So check her out. Also, Afro Mythos, which is by Adeche, or Adeche. Afro Mythos, it's a podcast by Adeche, and they are a couple that paint together while they tell stories about African myths, and they paint their interpretations of different mythical figures in African culture. I think they're mostly focused on like Nigerian mythos, but I do think that they mix it up and put some other cultures in there. So they're really cool. I like them. Those are the top two that I can think of.
Nice.
I have a lot of people I could recommend from TikTok, but we're in the podcast zone, so there you go.
Well, there y'all fucking go. So, listen to us, but also listen to actual Black creators.
Please.
Now we'll get on with it.
So the first person, let me just go ahead and send you a picture before I forget to send it. Here's this guy.
He looks familiar.
Okay.
Why?
Okay, so to start off Black History Month, outside of our cult series, I wanted to talk about some heroes through U.S. hardships, and there's too many amazing Black people throughout our history to touch on, so I wanted to talk about like a few per episode if we manage to have time. And I don't think it's any of our place this month to talk about any Black trauma, because as Karen just said, we're none of us Black. So you can go listen to those Black creators that we just talked about if you want to listen to some of that, because it's their place to talk about all of that stuff, and it's not our place to talk about any of it, I don't think.
Agreed. I would much, stay in my lane.
So I want to talk about some really cool Black history figures that accomplish really great things. One of those podcasts I listened to said that he was tired of hearing white people talk about Black trauma during Black History Month because it's not all about the awful things, which made me feel like I definitely shouldn't talk about it this month.
Good call. We talk about horrible things like cults and murder. Enough anyway.
Yeah, we do. It's not that the podcast shies away from bad things, but we will be doing it this month.
Mm-hmm.
So, for tonight, I just said we're not going to talk about bad things, but I am taking you back to the Civil War.
Well, Remy, this is inherently a bad thing.
It takes place during a bad time, but it doesn't mean the situation that's going to happen is a bad thing.
All
So,
right.
you just have to trust me. There are a few people who more fully embody the heroism associated with or revolutionary changes wrought by the Civil War than this man that we're going to talk about, whose name is Robert Smalls. And I sent you both a picture of him.
Oh, that's why he's familiar.
Yeah, that name is familiar, but I unfortunately cannot tell you why.
Em, do you know anything about him?
No, yes, I do, but I can't remember what I know because now I'm on the spot. It's the same thing like if somebody asked me like, how old
What's
are
your
you?
name?
Oh God.
Your name is easy. It's one letter.
I have so many though. Listen, somebody's like, what's your nickname? And I went
Which one?
and then I had to tell them about all of my nicknames. So that's me.
Well, I'm going to remind you about what you know about Robert Smalls, and I'm going to inform Karen about why she should have been taught about Robert Smalls all along.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Robert hatched a courageous and ingenious plan to seize his and his family's freedom that earned him fame across the North and infamy across the South.
That's what we like to hear.
Yeah. Robert Smalls was born on April 5th, 1839, to Lydia Polite, an enslaved house servant who lived in Beaufort, South Carolina. And she was enslaved to somebody named Henry McKee, who was a prominent cotton planter, who may have also been Robert's father.
Boo.
Yeah.
Boo that guy.
Yeah, fuck that.
But thank you for Robert Smalls, I guess.
Lydia raised Robert in a small shack that sat behind the, lovely McKee house. As a small boy, Robert served the McKee family domestically before being sent to Charleston in 1851 when he was just 12 years old. So, during his early years in Charleston, Robert lived in slave quarters on the property of Henry McKee's sister-in-law. He was hired out as a laborer, working as a waiter at a local hotel and as a city lamplighter, and passing on his earnings to his owner. And then later, Robert secured employment at the city's docks, loading and unloading ships, and then he served aboard some ships as a rigger, sailor, and wheelman.
Damn, okay.
Yeah, he's got quite the resume.
Yes, especially since he was a child. So, in December 1856, Robert married another enslaved person whose name was Hannah Jones. And interestingly, he managed to convince McKee, his owner, and Hannah's Samuel Kingman to allow the couple to live on their own in their own little place and to keep a small portion of their monthly earnings.
Damn, okay.
Which is very
Good.
weird for South Carolina of the time. Now, if I'm remembering correctly, he was only managing to keep like a few dollars a month or something like that. Which is not a lot. Like a lot for them, but not a lot of money.
Yeah, no.
It's a lot more than zero, but not a lot of money. So this arrangement enabled them to pay rent, because they had to pay rent on the place that they were living, and then whatever they managed to have after that, they also just saved in the hopes of saving enough money to purchase the freedom of their first child, Elizabeth.
They paid for the freedom for their child?
They tried to. They were trying to save up the money to purchase the freedom of their first child from Hannah's owner, because he agreed that if they could come up with $800, then he would sell their own child's freedom to them.
That's so much.
Yeah,
Jesus
let me look up the
Christ.
converter because I forgot to convert that. I converted all the other money in that section except that. Yeah, that's $28,606 in today money.
Well, why don't you just say fuck you?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Was he laughing when he said that? Jesus.
Yeah, like a cartoon villain twirling his mustache.
Fucking hell.
because it would have taken Robert a lifetime to be able to save up $28,606, saving what, like, I mean, maybe $5 a month,
That,
if that.
yeah, no, not happening. Oh,
Yeah,
people suck.
it's like the promise of hope to keep you working, but you're not gonna ever attain the thing. Because I was listening to I was listening to like a podcast episode about Robert from Redacted History, which I plugged at the beginning. And he was talking about how Robert tried to purchase Elizabeth's freedom, his daughter's freedom, with like some money. He tried to like basically put a down payment on her freedom, and the dude was like, "No, uh, but this is insulting, and now I'm gonna raise the price."
What the
No.
fuck? Oh my god. Tell me he kills him.
Demand
Well,
death.
let me keep going. So, when the Civil War broke out, Robert was working on the Planter, which was a 147-foot cotton steamer that the Confederacy commissioned to transport troops and supplies, lay torpedoes, and survey the southeastern coast waterways. So, through all the years, Robert had been thinking about a way to escape slavery. $800 was a huge sum of money for an enslaved person to save at the time. And like I was saying, the tiny amount Robert was allowed to save was just going to take forever to be able to manage to get. And then they also, when the Civil War broke out, they had just had another baby, Robert Jr.
Oh shit.
Oppressive fear that hovered over Robert and Hannah and anyone else really who was enslaved at the time, that they could at any moment be separated and sold to other people, and then they would just never see each other again.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. But escape was hard enough for a single person. To flee with a young family was just impossible. And an escape party that included children would slow the journey significantly, and discovery was going to be really likely if you tried to do that. And traveling with a baby, and especially like a brand new baby, was especially risky because it's not like the baby can control when it's crying. And so a baby's cry would alert the slave patrols. And like, very small detour, but this is my problem with movies like A Quiet Place. Have you seen Quiet Place?
It's been on my list, but I haven't actually watched it yet.
That's the one with John Krasinski, yeah?
Yeah.
That's the one I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but I read the synopsis. So, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
That whew.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to spoil anything either, except to say there's a baby in it, and it's a horror movie where people have to be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Which doesn't spoil anything, because that's in the synopsis of the movie when you're reading the little blurb, trying to figure out if you want to watch the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's literally part of the trailer of the movie. That spoils nothing. There's no spoilers there. There's a baby in it, and and people have to be quiet or you die. Literally, you can't make a single sound.
Yeah.
Like, you can't even cough in this world.
Mm-hmm.
If you cough, the monsters will kill you. That right there makes it a flawed argument for this world to literally make any sense, because people can't control that very basic body function.
Imagine farting in your sleep and peeing.
Right? Like, you wouldn't be able to snore. Almost
Oh.
everybody snores.
Oh no, we're fucked.
So fucked.
Almost everybody snores or sleep talks. I mean, just,
Yeah.
Like, I'd be screwed.
the human race would die out because nobody could have babies. But yes, babies cry. Babies can't help that they cry. If you have to be in an environment where you have to be deathly silent and make no noise, babies just cannot be there. Babies can't function. Which is
Yeah.
why babies can't ever exist in a horror movie, realistically.
Yeah. I mean, you need them to cry. That's why they spank the baby. They're like, birth,
I'm like,
spank,
what?
and then the baby's lungs fill with air, and you're like, okay, this baby's alive.
So, he couldn't take a baby with him if he was going to run away literally on foot, because the baby would be there and the baby would cry, and everybody in any sort of a radius would know that that baby was present.
Right. Oh.
I've only watched one horror movie, just one more final sidetrack, where a baby was present, and I just got done watching it.
Was it Rosemary's Baby?
No, that one didn't count because that baby wasn't born. That one was in her stomach. I just watched this movie and it was called Abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
It has one of the ladies from American Horror Story, and
Oh.
she has like a newborn baby who's like 4 or 5 or 6 months old, and that baby worked in this horror movie because it literally never stopped crying,
Oh my
and that was a
God.
plot point. It was a plot point of the horror movie that the baby never quit crying.
What movie was it?
Abandoned. I just said that.
Abandoned. Okay. Yeah, sorry. Sometimes
Oh,
words.
it's because my voice cut out.
No, it's just my brain.
Gotta wait for it to catch up.
Yeah. Abandoned.
I wish I worked from home so that I could do movie reviews.
So, if they had been caught while trying to escape, the punishment would be severe. Owners could legally have runaways whipped, shackled, or sold, and sometime, and like I said, they would never see each other again. So, sometime early in 1862, Robert figures it out, and with a plan as dangerous as it was brilliant, he quietly alerted the other enslaved crew members on board what he was going to do.
Tell us what he was gonna do.
What was he gonna do?
Okay, it was time for them to seize the planter.
Wait,
Seize the
like
means of production.
like piracy,
Like piracy.
or ooh, a full-blown mutiny.
Love mutinies.
So, as the vessel's wheelman, Robert was prepared to do this. He knew Charleston Harbor. He knew the signals the boat would have to use to pass Confederate checkpoints, and he knew where all the torpedoes were because he helped put them there.
Yeah, that's true.
I remember where I heard of him now. Tumblr. People love talking about historical badasses on Tumblr, and I'm just like, I must have read something.
Yeah, yeah.
Because this is all starting to sound really familiar.
Okay. Karen, you still haven't heard of him?
No, I think that's probably where I heard of him too. But the the brain has lost. It's like my brain is like Swiss cheese.
Mine is like a bog. You have to find everything again. It's there, but at what cost?
Okay. Okay. So the plan was still dangerous. Robert's plan was to commandeer the planter and deliver it to the imposing fleet of Union ships anchored outside Charleston Harbor. The vessels were part of a blockade of all major Southern ports President Abraham Lincoln had initiated shortly after Fort Sumter fell in April 1861. As one of the largest ports in the Confederacy, Charleston was a lifeline for the South. The South depended on imports of war material, food, medicine, manufactured goods, and other supplies that needed to come in and out of areas like Charleston. With the U.S. Navy blocking the harbor, like blockade runners would slip past with supplies still, but like it wasn't impossible to get through, but it was really, really difficult unless you were on one of those like small, hard to see boats.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Blockading an important port was like a staggering task because there were too many navigable channels in and out of the harbor that made stopping all traffic impossible. So, though the wharf and the U.S. fleet were only like 10 miles apart, Robert would still have to pass several heavily armed Confederate fortifications in the harbor, as well as multiple gun batteries along the shore without raising an alarm. And remember, his boat is like, what did I say, 174 feet long? 147. I had the numbers backwards. 147 feet long is the boat he's trying to get.
That's I'm not very good at measuring. That's a big boat, yeah?
Yeah, it's a big boat.
Okay. Like you could literally say like a 213-foot boat, and I would be like, that's a big boat, right? And then you could also say a 50-foot boat. I'd be like, that's a big boat, right? Like anything bigger than 6 feet, I'm like, that's big, right? So I just had to verify. That's a big boat, yeah? Like,
Karen, is that big?
yeah.
Man, I just found a 6-inch spider. Is that big? Sorry.
No, like like when someone says like, yeah, that's like the size of a football field, I'm like, I have no idea what that means.
That certainly is a size.
I'm like, that's big. It sounds big. Or they're like, yeah, it's like to the other side of the room. I'm like, I mean, big? Like, and they're like, no. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I don't know. I literally cannot comprehend. I don't know why. It's just never really made sense to me.
Oh, Karen. I know. I need to train you on sizes. We'll start small. I have a little ruler, and I'll show you an inch later.
It does not help. Okay.
Ready? I think we might be done.
Okay.
So a big boat.
Okay. Here is a literal picture of the actual literal boat.
Okay, thank you.
Is that big?
I don't know. I can't see anything. Oh, there's people. Okay. No. Okay, it's not that big. It's not as big as I thought.
It's like a standard steamboat size.
Yeah, steamboat. I was thinking.
This is just from a newspaper of the time.
Yeah.
Is that big?
Like, literally, you could tell me, like, battleship size and, like, say how many feet that is, and I would be like, I don't know.
How big is that?
I don't know.
Is that big? I can't let this go.
This is like 500 feet long, and I'm like, wow, that sounds big.
That's a big number.
It's a big number.
If I had $500 in my pocket, that would be a lot of dollars.
Yeah, literally. Okay.
500 feet. Oh my gosh, that's like a lot of tacos.
We've all learned something about me today. So, Remy, please tell me how he mutinied this boat and saved the world. I don't know. At least saved his family.
Did you see the last picture of it that I posted for you?
Yes.
Oh, with all the barrels.
With it next to, like, another ship. Also, here's just another newspaper article.
Is that not the same article? Just with more words?
It is. It's just zoomed out. It's the same article, just zoomed out.
So the planter is the one on the left?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, yes. This is a good-sized boat.
The bottom one is just a recreation.
Uh-huh.
Obviously, because it's in color. We didn't have color photography in the 1860s.
Color wasn't invented yet. Oh, wait. No, wait. This is Black History Month.
Jesus Christ.
Why am I like this? Fuck.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. Now, blockade runners are going to use, like, little small boats. Like, tiny ones. Because you want to be able to slip past the blockade so the Union ships don't catch you. And also, just, like, literally be able to go through it undetected. Now, a bigger boat like that, like, literally the size of, like, you saw, like, a size of a, like, sailing ship. Big steamboat. That thing is too big to be able to go unnoticed. Whether you know how big, like, 150 feet is or not in your brain, you can recognize 150 feet sounds like way too big to not be noticed.
You see, that's what I thought, but then I was like, well, you know, I don't I don't drive boats. How would I know?
It's okay, Karen. I have a hard time picturing how big things are once they get to a certain, level of size.
Yeah.
I used to be scared of tall buildings.
But how tall is tall?
You ever been to New York?
Well, yeah, that is tall.
It was just so astronomically huge that I couldn't really wrap my head around what I was seeing. And it made me really dizzy.
Yeah.
I don't think I could live in New York. I will never have to live in New York, but you know.
That's my fear of these big giant cruise ships. They're horrifying.
I
This
don't
it,
like them.
this is a horror. If anyone recommended a cruise to me, I would say no. No, thank you.
Everybody has a problem picturing things that are really big and really tiny when it gets to a certain point. Don't let people tell you that they don't.
I don't.
I'm just being a liar right now.
Accusations.
See, Josh is really good at this, though. He's like, yeah, that's probably about some feet. And I'm like, uh-huh. Or he's like, well, how far away is it? And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, well, is it like a mile, 2 miles? I'm like, I, um, I don't know.
It's because he's a math guy.
I guess.
He's got a math brain.
Yeah. I'm like, I mean, it takes 2 minutes to drive there. And he's like, okay. Doesn't really help me. And I'm like, you're not really helping me.
You're like, what does it mean? It doesn't help you. It takes 2 minutes.
We're speaking 2 different languages. Anyway, I'm so sorry. Please tell us the rest of the story.
Okay. The risk of discovery and capture was high. The planter created so much smoke and noise, because it's a steamship, that Robert knew he couldn't just rush through the Confederate waters undetected. Like, he couldn't do this quickly. The ship had to appear to be on a routine mission under the command of its 3 white officers who were always on board when it was underway. And Robert had come up with an inspired way to do just that. Protected by the darkness of the hour, Robert would impersonate the white captain by putting on the man's naval jacket and wide-brimmed straw hat and impersonating his distinctive way of pacing the deck was his plan.
Amazing.
Oh, wow.
Method acting.
Yeah, no fucking kidding.
But this was also dangerous, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So first, the 3 white officers posed an obvious obstacle, and Robert and his crew would have to find a way to deal with them. And second, they would have to avoid detection by the guards at the wharf as they seized the planter. Then, since Robert's family and others involved in the escape would be hiding in another steamer farther up the river, Smalls and the remaining crew would have to backtrack away from the harbor's entrance to pick them up. The planter's movement up the river and away from the harbor was likely to attract the attention of sentries posted among the wharves. If everyone made it on board, the party of 16 men, women, and children would then have to steam through the heavily guarded harbor. If sentries at any of the fortifications or the batteries realized something was amiss, they could easily destroy the planter in seconds.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, this is scary.
High stakes.
So then, once safely through the harbor, Robert and company still faced danger. Even if they got out of Confederate waters, they still faced danger, because approaching a Union ship, which would have to assume the Confederate steamer was hostile, unless Robert could quickly convince the Union crew that his party's intentions were friendly, the Union ship would take defensive action and open fire, which would likely destroy the planter and kill everybody on board.
All right. Oh, jeez.
So clearing any one of those obstacles would be a remarkable feat, but clearing all of them would be astounding and approaches levels sounding impossible.
Some might even say history worthy.
So, for the past year, Robert had been a trusted and valued member of the planter's enslaved crew. Although Robert had become known as one of the best pilots in the area, the Confederates refused to give him or any enslaved man the official title of pilot. The ship had a new captain. His name was Charles, who occasionally left the ship in the hands of the black crew overnight so he and his officers could stay with their wives and children in their homes in the city. By doing this, he was violating recent Confederate military orders, General Orders No. 5, which required white officers and their crews to stay on board day and night while the vessel was docked at the wharf so that they could be ready to go at any moment.
Ooh.
Yeah, so, like, maybe he trusted his crew, you could say, but also likely it was just that, like most white people, North and South, he probably just didn't think that his enslaved crew was capable of pulling off the kind of plan that Robert had put together.
Yeah.
When Robert told his wife about the plan, she asked what would happen if he were caught, and he said, "I shall be shot." And we know this
Uh,
because Robert kept journals about this stuff. So Robert said, "I will be shot." Matter of factly, while all the men on board would certainly be killed if they were captured, the women and children would probably be severely punished and probably sold to different owners. Hannah said to her husband, here's a quote: "It is a risk, dear, but you and I and our little ones must be free. I will go, for where you die, I will die."
Oh, oh,
wow.
oh no. I mean, oh, but I'm sad about this.
It's okay, dude.
When Robert judged the time was right, he ordered the steamer to leave. This would have been a night when the white people were just not on board.
Yeah.
Breaking rules. So the crew raised two flags. One was the first official Confederate flag, the stars and bars, and the other was South Carolina's blue and white state flag, which displayed a palmetto tree and a crescent. So both would help the ship maintain its cover as a Confederate vessel. The Confederate guards stationed about 50 yards away from the ship saw it leaving and moved closer to watch the boat leave, but he assumed that the vessel's officers were in command, because why wouldn't he assume that?
Mm-hmm.
So he just never raised the alarm.
Mm-hmm.
And then also at the docks that night was a police detective who also saw the ship was leaving, but he made the same assumptions. So Robert left undetected.
Lovely.
Good.
Awesome.
Relieving.
The planter's next task was to stop at the North Atlantic wharf to pick up his family and the others. The crew reached the North Atlantic wharf and had no trouble approaching the pier. Robert wrote, quote, "The boat moved so slowly up to her place we did not have to throw a plank or tie a rope," quote.
Wow.
So all 16 people got on board the ship, and so once they were all there and the women and children were moved below decks, the planter resumed her way south toward Confederate Fort Johnson, leaving Charleston behind them. At about 4:15 a.m., the planter neared Fort Sumter, whose massive walls were like 50 feet above the water, which is very high. So, on board the planter, everybody was terrified. The only one not outwardly affected by fear was Robert. Here's a quote from Alfred Gordine, who was the engineer on board. He said, quote, "When we drew near the fort, every man but Robert Smalls felt his knees giving way, and the women began crying and praying," quote.
Yeah.
I'm crying and praying now.
Yeah.
So as the planter approached the fort, Robert pulled the whistle cord, offering 2 long blows and a short one, which was the Confederate signal required to pass. And Robert knew from earlier trips as just a member of the planter's crew.
Mm-hmm.
So the sentry didn't question anything. The sentry just yelled out, according to people on the boat, "Blow the damn Yankees to hell or bring one of them in."
All right.
Robert confidently actually yells something back, and he just yelled "I" back.
Ugh. Awesome.
But like, what a risk.
What a risk. Like he's like, I got, you
I
know,
got nothing.
he's like, I'm here. I may as well. I've come this far. May as well. Man. Whew. All right.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, he's fully into character at this point. So, got to give it up. He's committed to the role of captain. I mean, he was the captain. So, that's rad. I'm like rocking. I'm like, I hope they make it. I'm like, I know that they do. I'm just like, oh my god. Like
I have a picture also for this. Let me send it to you. Here's another boat.
Good boat. Good boat. Context for this boat.
So, with steam and smoke belching from her stacks and her paddle wheels churning through the dark water, the steamer headed toward the closest of the Union ships, while her crew rushed to take down the Confederate and South Carolina flags and hoist up a bedsheet to signal surrender.
mm-hmm.
Ah.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, though, another heavy fog had started rolling in because it was morning, so like a fog had started coming in on the river. and throughout the harbor, and it was obscuring the steamer and the white flag, improvised
like
flag
that.
that it had started to raise.
Don't like that.
The crew of the Union ship they were approaching, which was a 174-foot three-masted clipper called the Onward, which is the one I just sent you, was now even more unlikely to see the flag in time and might assume that the Confederate ironclad, which is the type of boat that he was on, not the planter, was classed as an ironclad. The Onward might think that they were planning on ramming and sinking them.
Ooh,
No.
not good.
As the steamer continued toward the Onward, those aboard the planter began to realize that their improvised flag had been seen, so their freedom was closer. The two vessels were within hailing distance of one another, and the Onward's captain, who was acting volunteer Lieutenant John Frederick Nichols, yelled for the steamer's name and her intent, and so the people over here on the planter yelled their answers back. And so the captain over on the Onward said to bring the boat alongside, so for them to like pull up side by side of each other. And then the people over on the planter did not hear this instruction.
Oh no.
And tried to just go around the front end of the boat.
Mm-hmm.
To which the people on the Onward, the captain on the Onward, yelled that if they did not stop the boat right then, he was going to blow them out of the water.
No.
But they did hear that, so
Oh,
they
thank
did
God.
stop the boat and they pulled up alongside of the Onward.
Mm-hmm.
So over on the planter, the men began jumping and dancing and shouting, and the women were all happy, and the people behind them at Fort Sumter were probably cursing. And all 16 of the people on board were free for the first time in their lives.
Yay!
So, according to the people who were there, Robert said to the captain of the Onward, "Good morning, sir. I brought you some of the old United States guns that were meant for Fort Sumter."
Amazing. What a badass.
Yes. Robert's feat caught Northerners and Southerners both off guard. He was hailed as a hero by newspapers throughout the North. The New York Herald proclaimed the escape, quote, "one of the most daring adventures since the war was commenced," quote. The episode also spoke directly to one of the most pressing policy debates of the war, because up to this point, nobody had decided whether or not it was okay for Black people to be able to actually fight in the Civil War. And because of Robert Smalls, it persuaded the reluctant Northerners that African Americans would be willing to fight for their liberty. So Robert insisted the New York Tribune. Robert insisted the New York Tribune, quote, "has added new proof to the evidence that Black people," because I'm not going to use the words that they use, "have skill and courage and tact, and that they will risk their lives for the sake of their liberty," quote.
Hell yeah.
So then the Union Major General David Hunter advocated that they should arm free Black people of the North, and sent Robert Smalls as part of a delegation to convince President Abraham Lincoln and Secretary of War Edwin McMaster Stanton of the wisdom of this course of action. So Robert Smalls is directly responsible for that.
Go, yeah. Go. Woo!
Down on the Confederate side of things, the story was like difficult for them to swallow.
Huh. Imagine that.
How many people would have lost their jobs over this one?
Probably so many. Here's a quote. Quote, "Our community was intensely agitated Tuesday morning," reported the Charleston Courier on May 14th. Robert had deprived the Confederacy of precious commodities. He took from them 16 former slaves, a well-armed gunboat, and all the cargo that was on it, which included 4 cannons and a gun carriage.
Nice.
While providing all of that to the Union, as well as essential intelligence about the Confederate defenses and waterways around Charleston, which, if you remember me saying, was an essential port and had Fort Sumter. As a reward for delivering the planter to the Union, Congress passed a bill authorizing prize money be paid to Robert and his crew. So Robert received $1,500, which is about $53,638 today.
Nice.
Wait, how much? How much again?
$53,638 today.
No, how much then?
$1,500.
Okay, so okay.
Which is a significantly lower sum of money than he would have gotten had the boat been accurately appraised, but it was still quite a lot of money. recognizing his talent, Rear Admiral Samuel Francis DuPont, which was the commander of the South Atlantic blockade, offered him a position as a civilian pilot for the U.S. Navy. Um, Robert accepted the job, which paid the salary of $40 a month, which is about $1,430 a month.
Mm.
And they put his skills to good use, piloting several vessels, which included the Planter.
Hell yeah.
Fuck yeah.
That had to be rough for the people of Charleston to just see their boat over on the other side of the blockade.
That's great. That's fantastic.
In April of 1863, Robert steamed back toward Charleston as the pilot of a boat called the Keokuk, which was a 750-ton ironclad that was part of a major naval assault on the city. And during the attack, which was ultimately repelled, an intense Confederate barrage from Fort Sumter sunk his boat. And despite extraordinary efforts by Robert and his fellow crew members to save the ship, Robert thereafter resumed his duties aboard the Planter, though this time he was a civilian pilot for the Army because the ship had been reassigned over there. So he was in two branches of the military.
Dang.
Gets around.
His resume grows.
Yes, later that year, the Planter, while transporting provisions from Folly Island to Morris Island, where 6,000 Union soldiers were stationed, it came under such intense fire that the captain of the boat ordered Robert to beach the ship. But Robert said no.
Damn.
No.
So the captain retreated from the pilot house to the coal bunker. So the captain abandoned his post. And so Robert was like, okay. So Robert assumed command of the Planter and just sailed the boat to safety.
Listen here, you little shits. We're going to get this boat to safety.
Whether you like it or not.
That guy crying in his room, he's not going to get you anywhere. But me, I'm going to get you to shore. We're all going to go home and see our families.
So Robert was rewarded by being named the ship's captain, and he was the first African American to hold that position in the Union Army.
Fuck yeah.
So Robert continued in that role through the end of the war and into 1866. And by his own count, he participated in 17 military engagements.
Wow.
In early 1864, Robert's growing salary, which was $150 a month, $5,363 a month.
Whoa.
That's a good chunk of change.
That's more money than I made.
Yep.
Same.
So in early 1864, Robert's salary, which had ballooned up to $5,000 some odd a month with his promotion to captain, as well as his Planter prize money, that had enabled him to do what was unthinkable for somebody who had formerly been enslaved. He purchased the Beaufort home of his former owner, Henry McKee.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So Henry McKee didn't live there anymore. Some other guy was living there. And but that dude failed to pay the property taxes on the house when the Union occupied the area.
Oh, sweet revenge. Oh my God.
He failed to pay. You didn't pay the taxes. What? Oh my God.
Yeah. So he paid $23,000 for the house in today's money. And then he moved his family into the house. And the white owner, filed a lawsuit to regain the property, but the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Robert's favor in 1878.
Damn straight.
Amazing.
So 3 years earlier, Robert had demonstrated noteworthy generosity also because he permitted Jane McKee, who was the widow of his former master, and several of her children to just come and live with his family in the house.
What?
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. So after the war was over in the Reconstruction era, Robert became a successful local businessman and state politician. He operated a general store in Beaufort and invested in several properties in the area in addition to his house. He also helped to found the Enterprise Railroad Company of Charleston, and in 1867, South Carolina's Republican Party, which, just to remind people, the Republicans and the Democrats used to be flipped over. So the Republicans used to be the ones who were for equitable stuff, and they used to be anti-slavery and all of that stuff, and the Democrats used to be the ones who were really conservative.
Mm-hmm.
So he founded South Carolina's Republican Party, the liberals. So 1 year later, Smalls was a delegate to the 1868 State Constitutional Convention, which was a groundbreaking biracial assembly that recast the South Carolina Constitution in a more modern and progressive fashion. The convention worked to democratize the state by removing property ownership qualifications for serving in the legislature and establishing universal manhood suffrage, quote,
Mm.
which just meant that they were working on like making it so that all men could do the things, and not just the white men.
Right. You didn't have to uh, own property and be white.
Yes. So Robert was particularly influential in the passage of a proposal providing for the creation of a public education system open to children of all races.
Fuck yeah.
I love that.
Yep. And he remained a strong voice for education as a member of the South Carolina General Assembly. And in 1868, Beaufort County voters sent him to the State House of Representatives.
Awesome.
Yeah. And 2 years later, the black majority county elected Robert to the state Senate, where he served until 1875. And by this point, Robert had also been appointed Major General of the South Carolina Militia, an office he held until 1877, when white Democrats, quote unquote, redeemed the state and retook political control of the militia.
Ugh.
In 1874, Robert was elected to the first of 5 terms he would serve in the U.S. House of Representatives over the course of the next 12 years.
Holy shit.
Yeah, Robert's time in Washington, D.C. was tumultuous, largely because of his conservative opponent's successes in South Carolina. The black congressman did manage a few legislative victories, including securing funding for harbor improvements at the Port Royal Naval Station from his hometown. But ultimately, he just did so many amazing things for the 1860s and 70s in general, but also what an amazing accomplishment he did, freeing himself and all those 16 people and turning over all that stuff to the Union and opening the pathway for black soldiers to fight for the freedom of themselves and others.
Mm-hmm.
Like, literally, all he, like, could have had to do in his life was that amazing escapade. And if he, like, lived, quiet and with his family, just, doing that, like, that would have been more than enough, But he, like, went above and beyond and, like, just fought for, everything. And it's like, I wish it didn't have to be that way. I wish he could have, lived a life where he just was a family man. But, he did what he did for everyone so that they could be family people. And I hope.
Karen, you sound like you're about to cry.
It's just, it's just so unfair that he had to keep going. Like, I feel like, you go on your big adventure and then you have a happy ending. That's how it's supposed to be. But his adventure just kept going and going and going. And he, of course, it was amazing. And he did all these incredible things. But it's like, even with all that amazing stuff he's done in his life, we started this episode with, oh yeah, that name's familiar. Like, that is so fucked up. Like, we know way more about Robert E. Lee, who was a complete monster, and Andrew Jackson, who's terrible, than we do about Robert Smalls, who lived the most incredible life and did all these amazing things and fought for freedom. And I think that it's just so annoying to me. I feel like I was gypped, right?
Gypped is a racial slur.
Is it really? Oh,
shit. It comes from gypsy.
I'm so sorry. I had no idea.
Just throwing that out there. I learned this recently. And I'm like, oh, shit.
Well, I feel like
You've been slighted.
Yeah. Like, I really would have been more engaged in history if I learned about people like this and heard stories like this. Because I honestly don't care. like about all of the different war battle thingies and the very specifics of this and that. Like, I care about individual stories and how people like this affected the world in really big ways. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's just,
Well, I mean, you're right though. He effectively changed history. Like he changed the course of a lot of shit just by doing this.
yeah. And I feel like maybe he had a paragraph in a history book that, was not required reading or something. And you're like, why are we only learning about these now? It would have been like, I don't know. I just, I'm glad that these stories are becoming more prevalent. And I hope that the kids now and in the future continue to learn more about people like Robert Smalls than spending all their time focused on like Winston Churchill or Elizabeth I. I'm like, yeah, okay, they're great. They did cool things, but like, we got to focus on people who did really cool things that, weren't ever mentioned and should have been. That's all I got to say. I'm just annoyed that I didn't know more about Robert Smalls. And now, and I guess I don't want anyone to think that they have to live a magnificent life in order to leave, in order to be like, how do I explain this? I don't know how to make this into words, but even the people who were on the ship, whose names we may not know, their stories and their lives are just as important as his. They didn't go on to do all the things he did, obviously, but I hope that people recognize that they are also of value. And I'm glad that they got to be wherever they went.
Oh, that's good, bro.
Okay, so while we're talking about the Civil War, let's talk about Mary Jane Richards, who has gone by a lot of names. And I just closed the thing that had her other names in there. Why? I don't know.
Now we have to come up with them. Mary Jane Richards. MJ.
Weed.
Weed. M?
Remy gets it.
I do get it.
Oh, because Mary Jane.
Oh my god.
Mary Jane. MJ.
Okay, I opened it back up. Mary Jane Richards, who went by a number of different names, at least 7 different names according to historical records. Her birth name, yes, her birth name was Mary Jane Richards, but she also officially, as far as we've been able to tell, went by Mary Jane Henley, Mary Jones, Richmonia Richards, Richmonia R. St. Pierre, Mary J.R. Garvin, and Mary J. Denman. And this one's not listed in the list, so I guess we'll add an 8th name. But she also, very briefly, went by Mary Elizabeth Bowser, which is the name that you will most often find her listed as when you try to search for her when you're looking up facts about her.
Well, okay.
It reminds me of Leverage. Sophie?
Oh yeah, Sophie Devereaux.
Sophie Devereaux, who has about like 15 different names.
Is she like who?
Have you seen Leverage?
No. Okay, I just looked it up. Sophie Devereaux in Leverage is the team's grifter.
Mm-hmm.
She's cool as fuck, and I love her.
I've never seen that show.
Oh, it's great. You would love it. Okay. It's about a team of criminals who do good things and get back at corporations.
So anti-capitalist. I love it.
Sophie is the grifter, and she has like a billion different names, but she's the best. She's so nice.
Heart.
Yeah, she's the heart of the group. That's why I'm like, is she like a grifter, but like Robin Hood-esque grifter?
Anyway, Mary Jane Richards, who went by all those names. Mary Bowser is what you'll find her by when you try to Google her, because that's the name that people have latched onto. But she only went by that name for like a tiny little bit of time. But that's the one that everybody knows her by.
Okay.
Why?
It stuck because years and years after the events that I'm going to talk about, the niece the niece of one of the people in the story said that she knew who Mary was, and she gave the name Mary Elizabeth Bowser, and so it has just persisted. But the woman in question was only 6 years old at the time that all of this stuff takes place, so she actually was not an authority at all.
But people would just be like, okay, let's listen to the 6-year-old.
Yeah, they figured that because she was, like, present during some of it, that she would know, even though she was a child, so she is not an authority at all on what Mary's true name is. Bowser was just a name that Mary had for, like, a very tiny bit of her life, but it's the one that's stuck around.
So who is she?
Mary was born sometime between 1839 and 1841. Sometime in those chunks of years, Mary was born. Her family was enslaved by the Van Loo family of Richmond, Virginia, but the one member of that family that we're going to focus on is Elizabeth Van Loo, born 1818. The Van Loos were a wealthy family, and when Elizabeth was old enough, she was sent to Philadelphia to get an education. As a teen, she began to see the injustice of slavery throughout the country. And as she got older, her stance against slavery only got stronger, despite the fact that her family owned enslaved workers.
Mm,
Elizabeth wrote in her diary, quote, "No pen, no book, no time can do justice to slavery's wrongs, its horrors."
damn.
Yeah. So her father died in 1843, and Elizabeth and her mother, after that, freed the enslaved people that the family owned.
Nice.
And Elizabeth used the money from her father's death, which was $10,000, and in today's money, that's about $200,000.
Oof. Yeah, that's good money.
Wow.
She used that money to buy and free the relatives of the enslaved people that her family had owned.
Whoa.
Putting money where the mouth is.
Mhm. So Mary found herself free in 1843 in Richmond, Virginia, which is not a good place for freed black people.
Yeah, unfortunately.
hmm But she chose to stay on with Elizabeth, working there as a servant.
Getting paid.
Yeah. So as a child, Mary had been given what others have written as special treatment by the Van Loo family. She'd been baptized as an infant in their family's church, and also she was sent to Philadelphia to get an education.
Okay.
So for a while after she was educated, Elizabeth sent Mary to the West African nation Liberia also. That was in 1855.
Oh,
So Mary would have been like around 15.
wow.
Some sources I read about this say that Elizabeth sent Mary over there for missionary work, but other sources that I read said that sending Mary away was just an example of the disturbing way that people viewed free black people during the day, which was that they didn't belong in the United States at all.
Yeah, I was wondering because she said she's against slavery, but is she for equal rights?
I mean, I don't know, because I'm not Elizabeth and don't know her.
Right. That's just usually how it is with white people at that time. They're like, "Yeah, slavery's bad, but no, you can't go to the same store as me."
But yeah, because it's the 1840s. It's a conflicted time period.
Yeah.
Now we know because we talked about the Quakers and the Shakers that there are plenty of white people that didn't feel that way about having people of other nationalities and skin colors and stuff be around them and doing things. 'Cause there were plenty of white people that didn't feel like society needed to be inherently unequal in any way when it came to having black people living amongst them. But for non-Quaker and Shaker people, yeah, it was often a very conflicted way of feeling. Because, like, for example, about this like way of thinking, Abraham Lincoln himself was anti-slavery, but also Abraham Lincoln felt that black people shouldn't live in the United States in general.
Yep.
And I have met almost nobody. I don't think I've ever met anybody actually who knew that Abraham Lincoln didn't want black people to live in America.
Yeah, no, I thought that he was like full on like, yeah, they're human beings. They're just like us. They should be equal.
I remember telling you too that Abraham Lincoln had first said that if he could quote that if he could end the war without freeing a single black person that he would do that.
Yeah.
I remember you were like, "He did what?" What did
Yeah,
he say?
yeah, he did. He said what? Yeah.
Because he's not taught of that way. Like, nobody teaches him like that. He's supposed to be the best.
He
Uh,
killed vampires, you know?
yeah, of course. Nobody, nobody wants to teach the stuff about Abraham Lincoln where he says things like that. A- And, and nobody wants to talk about the fact that he actively wanted to ship out all of the black people in the United States and just make the country only for white people. I didn't learn it in school. I didn't learn it in high school. I didn't learn it when I was getting my bachelor's degree, and I didn't learn it when I was getting my master's degree. I learned it from black creators on TikTok and YouTube and stuff. I learned it by actively seeking the knowledge out myself,
Yes.
and then I furthered up hearing it from black creators by researching it myself when I was like, I don't I don't know. I never learned that. I went and looked it up myself because that made me feel uncomfortable. And I was like, "Well, it's my job to look this up myself now and read about it."
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give all of the listeners who have probably never heard this, the example that Abraham Lincoln was anti-slavery, but Abraham Lincoln didn't want black people living in this country or integrating with white society. So Abraham Lincoln thought that it was best if he just shipped out all of the black people from the country and put them somewhere else. So, literally a day before he issued the final Emancipation Proclamation to effectively end slavery in America, he signed a contract with a man named Bernard, who is an entrepreneur and Florida cotton planter. Their agreement was to use federal funds to relocate 5,000 formerly enslaved people from the United States to somewhere called Cow Island,
Huh?
which was a 20 square mile island off the southwestern coast of Haiti. Like, one day before he put out the Emancipation Proclamation, he had signed an agreement saying he was going to be shipping enslaved people to islands off the coast of Haiti because he didn't want them here.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
So the idea was there, floating around in society. Like, it was a prevalent idea of the time that even amongst, like, up in the North, amongst people that want to think we're, like, stridently anti-slavery and that black people should be integrated into society, the idea was around that actually black people should be free but also not live here.
Jesus.
So in my research about Elizabeth Van Lew and Mary Jane Richards, the idea was put forward in a bunch of places like Time magazine and stuff, that Elizabeth maybe sent Mary away because she didn't think Mary needed to live here anymore now that she was free. My arguments against that is that she only sent Mary away and didn't send the rest of the freed enslaved people away. She just sent Mary.
Yeah.
And that if she didn't want any of the freed slaves to live here, she would have sent all of them to Liberia and not just Mary.
Did she send her away forever or for like just missionary work to come back?
Mary lived in Liberia until 1860, so that was 7 years. But she was unhappy living there, and so she just came back. She came back to the United States, and when she got back to Virginia, she was arrested.
What?
Why?
So she was arrested because in Virginia there was a law that prohibited Black Virginians who had lived in a free state or who had gotten an education from living there.
What?
What the F?
I don't understand.
In Virginia, if you were a free Black person, you couldn't live there. If you had been to a free state, you couldn't live there in Virginia. Or if you were an educated Black person, you couldn't live there.
What the fuck?
They didn't want the education spread.
Yeah, they didn't want the education or the idea of freedom to spread amongst the other Black people in the state. It was a pro-slavery state.
That is so fucked. That is like,
When she got arrested, they found her walking in the street, and she told them that she was a free Black woman, so they arrested her. She spent 10 days in jail, and she gave the name Mary Jane Henley.
mm.
When she got there, she said, "Actually, my name is Mary Jones."
She's like, just kidding. I like all the hats she's wearing.
And then after 10 days, she said that her name was Mary Jane Richards, and so they were able to contact Elizabeth Van Lew to come and pay her bail. And Elizabeth told them that she was actually that she was actually enslaved, even though she wasn't. And so they told her that she was getting fined for letting her slave wander around without somebody and not to do it again. And and then they went about their business.
Man, thanks, Elizabeth. But also, damn, that's a shitty lie to have to tell.
Yeah.
No, she's not free. She's my slave. Ugh.
So
Fucking sucks.
Mary got married to a fellow servant in the Van Loo household whose name was Wilson Bowser.
Oh.
So that's when she became Mary Bowser. And then the Civil War started up.
All right. All right.
And then also, shortly after the Civil War began, Wilson Bowser disappears.
What?
Uh,
You know, he emancipated himself.
Oh.
what, from life?
No, from Richmond, Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't blame him running away because Virginia was a hostile place, and also the Confederacy just took up residency there as the capital of the Confederacy.
Yeah, Richmond was the heart of it.
hmm So Wilson said, "I'm gone. I'm leaving," and he just left.
All right.
Do what you do, I guess.
Yeah, you can't blame him for that because legally in Virginia he could have just been picked up and sold into slavery, even though he was not a slave at the time.
Jesus. Yeah.
So he got out of there. So shortly after the Civil War began, Elizabeth began volunteering as a nurse at the tobacco warehouse in Richmond that housed Union prisoners. They started calling that place Libby Prison. In July of 1861, she and her mother started to bring food, clothes, books, medicine, and other materials to the prisoners.
Mhm.
And while doing that, she started like picking up information from the prisoners and taking information out of the prison from the prisoners. And this started like a sort of back and forth where, unbeknownst to the guards, Elizabeth Van Loo became an unofficial like helper of the
Spy.
Union, where she would take deliveries in and hide messages and plans for escape in with her deliveries.
Oh, delightful.
And Elizabeth Van Loo had a mansion. You know, this is Virginia, and she at one point had a bunch of enslaved people. So she has this giant house, her family does. And so she would even at points house escaped Union soldiers there. And then they would go from there and try to make their way back north,
Go, Elizabeth. And Elizabeth's mom.
whose name I don't know. I could find out if I looked, but Elizabeth's mom also a very nice lady. So Elizabeth's assistance to enemies of the Confederacy was met with disdain around Richmond, but she put on this persona where people called her Crazy Bets because Bets, like Betsy, is a nickname for Elizabeth,
Mhm.
and she would like mumble nonsense to herself and act like she was like distractible and just like crazy lady, and people would leave her alone.
Incredible.
And eventually, Elizabeth's efforts to help the Union reached military leaders in the North, mainly some guy named General Benjamin Butler, who sent a representative to recruit her as a Union spy officially.
Yes.
Very nice.
And so, under his instructions, Elizabeth started growing a network of spies to have them deliver dispatches in a colorless ink that could only be deciphered when milk was applied to the paper.
Ew.
Ooh.
So, the most valuable asset in her spy ring was Mary.
Oh.
Mary was able to spy for the Union in an entirely different way than the white people that Elizabeth employed, because Mary was able to spy from the vantage point of a domestic servant.
Oh.
Mary was incredibly smart, she was well educated, and she could she would put on this, like, dim-witted persona where she would just act like she couldn't understand what was happening around her, and at the same time she was doing that, she would eavesdrop on conversations that people were having where she was, like, serving dinner at dinner parties, and she would just, like, listen to these Confederate soldiers make plans and stuff, and then she would go and report that information back to Elizabeth, who would in turn report that back to the Union Army.
Amazing. Go, Mary.
After cleaning and cooking at functions and stuff for the family of Confederate President Jefferson Davis, Mary was eventually brought into the the Confederate White House. Mary said she was only there once. Other sources say she was there more than once. Nobody actually has a clear idea how many times she was actually in there because Mary never gives an actual full or clear perspective on what she was doing during this time.
Well, yeah, she's a spy, you guys. She can't. Come on. She's a fucking spy.
So she was inside the Confederate White House at some number of times. At the very least, she was in there one time, but she was there some number of times.
Mm-hmm.
During the singular time that Mary says she was there, she went in there to gather laundry and dust and things, and then while she was in there when nobody else was around, she went into the study, and went through the drawers and read over a bunch of documents and then made her way back out.
Love it.
Yeah, so she read a bunch of plans and documents that were laid out and hidden in desks, and, like, things like that. Other sources that I read said that she was there for longer than just the one time, and that she was around for, like, dinner functions and things at Jefferson Davis's house and overheard plans there. But even if she was only there the one time to read a bunch of plans and documents in his desk, that would have been enough because Mary was born with a photographic memory.
What?
Whoa. Love it. Love it.
Yeah. So that made her an amazing asset for the Union,
Hell yeah.
a real problem for the Confederacy.
Hell yeah.
We love it.
Sometimes she would meet back at Elizabeth's plantation. Sources said that they would talk like they were exchanging recipes, but really they were passing information, which Elizabeth would then send on to Ulysses S. Grant. Other methods of transferring information included using a serving tray with a false bottom or hanging up laundry in a coded fashion.
Real spy shit. I love it.
And so there's not actually much information as to what Mary was actually reporting back because she was a spy. All of her dispatches to Elizabeth were destroyed out of fear that they would lead to repercussions if they were found. But Elizabeth's diary entries imply that Mary's reports were critical to helping the Union navigate their way toward victory during the war. For example, quote, "When I open my eyes in the morning, I say, 'What news, Mary?' and my caterer never fails!" Exclamation mark. Quote, Elizabeth wrote. And also, most generally, our reliable news is gathered from Negroes, and they certainly show wisdom, discretion, and prudence, which is wonderful! Exclamation mark. Quote.
Just delightful.
As the war came to a close in 1865, Elizabeth was thanked personally by Union General Ulysses S. Grant. He said, quote, "You sent me the most valuable information received from Richmond during the war," and she couldn't have gotten that information without Mary's help.
That's right.
Because Elizabeth didn't do a lot of her own spying, I gather, during this time. Elizabeth did a lot of her own spying when her and her mother were going back and forth to the prison. But after she was employed officially as a spy, from what I gather, she didn't do her own spying. She just sort of worked as the hub of a spy network that the numbers that I saw was included about 12 people.
Nice.
After the war was over, everybody knew it was Elizabeth who was doing it, but Elizabeth didn't give up the rest of the people, but her community shunned and abandoned her.
Oh.
She was left with largely almost no money because she had used all of her savings and the money that she had gotten in her inheritance to not only just free Mary and Mary's family and all the rest of their enslaved people, but to run the spy network. She had been using all of her own money to do it because I guess the Union didn't bother to pay her for it.
Bro.
What the fuck?
Ulysses S. Grant gave her money afterwards, but the sources that I read specifically said it was not enough to cover the costs of what she had been doing.
Well, thankless work. But
Yeah.
fuck.
It wasn't until her deathbed and after her death that her niece came forward and said that the spy who was working in the Confederate White House was Mary Elizabeth Bowser, which is why that name has persisted. But Mary Jane Richards never did use that name past the point where she was married to that guy. After the war, she started using Mary Jane Richards again for a very short period of time. She was using that name in Richmond when she began teaching enslaved people in the area, formerly enslaved people in the area.
Oh.
But in 1865, she quit using that name and started traveling throughout the country giving lectures about her experiences during the war, and she started doing that under the name Richmonia Richards.
Richmonia Richards.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
The New York Times listed an event where she was talking, quote, "lecture by a colored lady," which stated, quote, "Miss Richmonia Richards, recently from Richmond, where she has been engaged in organizing schools for the freedmen and has also been connected with the Secret Service of our government, will give a description of her adventures on Monday evening, dot, dot, dot." Quote, and fittingly for a double agent, Richard's speeches often contradicted one another, which has left historians confused about what the actual story involves. The one thing that is constant is that she was sarcastic and funny when she was talking, and, like, the base details, which are the things that I have given you because I can't corroborate other things. And as she traveled the country, her the records of her whereabouts got, like, really hard to keep up with, and, like, in true fashion, she was last seen meeting with the abolitionist Harriet Beecher Stowe in Georgia in 1867, and that was literally the last time anybody knew of her.
Whoa. Wait, so we don't even know where she's buried?
Not as far as I could tell, we really don't know anything about it.
She's still alive. She's a secret
Like, on
spy. She's still
on
alive.
her on her, Wikipedia page, it doesn't even have a thing about her death. On Postwar Life, it just ends by saying, "In 1867, a letter to the superintendent of education for the Georgia Freedmen's Bureau, she requested that he refer to her as Mary J. R. Garvin." And that's it. And then it has a section of untrue or unsubstantiated claims.
Hmm. Well, that's kind of lame, but also mysterious. The perfect
Yeah.
ending for a spy.
Yeah.
So, finally, the end, I just wanna talk to you real quickly about World War One, and we're gonna talk about the all-black 369th Infantry Regiment, and in particular, a man named Henry Johnson. He was 5'4" and weighed 130 pounds when he signed up and shipped out to France. Poorly trained, the unit mostly performed menial labor, unloading ships and digging latrines until it was lent to the French Fourth Army, which was short on troops. The French, those people were a lot less preoccupied by race than the American troops were, and they welcomed the men who were called the Harlem Hellfighters.
Hmm.
It's a cool name.
Yeah,
Were they all from Harlem?
I guess. The Hellfighters were sent to Outpost 20 on the western edge of the Argonne. Karen?
Hmm. How do you spell it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you spelled it. You said it right. Argonne.
Okay. Privates Henry Johnson and Needham Roberts from Trenton, New Jersey were given French helmets, French weapons, and enough French words to understand commands from their superiors. Those two were posted on sentry duty on the midnight to 4 a.m. shift, just the two of them. Johnson thought it was, quote, crazy, because there's a lot of quotes from him thrown out through this because this is World War One and there's a lot of newspaper coverage. So Johnson thought it was crazy, quote, to send untrained men out at the risk of the rest of the troops. He later told a reporter, but he told the corporal he'd, quote, tackle the job. So he and Roberts weren't on duty long when German snipers began firing at them.
Oh, Jesus.
After the shots rang out, Johnson and Roberts lined up a box of grenades in their dugout to have ready if a German raiding party tried to make a move on them. And just after 2 a.m., Johnson heard the, quote, snippin' and clippin', he said, of wire cutters on the perimeter fence and told Roberts to run back to camp to let the French troops know there was trouble happening.
Hmm.
And then it was just going to be him and however many Germans were out there shooting at him.
Christ.
Oh, Jesus.
So Johnson threw a grenade toward the fence, which brought a volley of return gunfire from the Germans, as well as an enemy grenade.
Oh, fuck.
Now, Roberts, he didn't get very far before he decided to return to help Johnson fight because he was like, I am not going to leave my friend alone
Good.
with all the Germans.
Good.
But on his way back, he was hit with a grenade.
Oh my god.
No!
Yeah. And he was wounded so badly in his arm and his hip, he could not fight.
No.
Yeah. So Johnson had him lie in the trench and just hand him up grenades.
Oh.
So there was a ton of enemy soldiers, and they were advancing from literally all directions. Johnson threw grenades until he ran out of grenades.
Oh, my God.
While he was throwing grenades at people. He was shot by German bullets in the head and in his mouth, but he threw grenades and he shot his rifle into the darkness the whole time. Then, this whole time while he's doing that, he was shot in his side, then in his hand, but he kept shooting until he ran out of bullets and tried to shove an American cartridge clip into his French rifle and it jammed.
Oof.
Oh, fuck.
So now this guy, reminding you, 5'4", 130 pounds. He's out of grenades and he's out of bullets, and his gun is jammed anyway. And he's facing down. He doesn't even know how many Germans, and he's been shot a bunch of times, including in the head. And he's standing in a trench over his wounded friend who cannot help him fight.
Oh my god. Don't tell me.
So, go on.
Don't tell me that he, like, climbs out of this trench and starts punching people in the face. Remy.
So,
Remy!
Oh god.
Oh my god.
so the Germans literally are right on top of him, and they're like coming into the trench. So Johnson swung his rifle like a club and just starts beating the Germans with his rifle.
Okay, so he didn't punch people necessarily.
But damn, it got close.
Jesus.
He literally just turns his rifle around and starts beating these people with his rifle like a club until the stock of his rifle splinters apart.
Oh my
Oh
god.
my god.
And then somebody hit him in the head and he goes down.
Oh no.
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 Oh my god.
So then the Germans overwhelm him, and he saw some of them taking his friend Roberts away out of the trench.
No.
Yes.
No.
So he's looking around. The only weapon that he has is his bolo knife. Let me show you. Bolo
Oh
knife.
my god.
This tiny little knife.
Is it big?
No,
mean-
it's little.
I mean, it's not tiny. It's not the biggest thing either. It's like a normal standard issue knife. Military knife.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Yeah, so that's what he's got. That's all he's got.
It's not a gun, I'll tell you that.
Not against all these Germans, no. So he takes his knife and he struggles back to his feet and he charges at the Germans who are trying to take his friend.
Oh my god.
And he just starts hacking at them.
Oh my god.
And Johnson says, quote, "Each slash meant something, believe me." He says, "I wasn't doing exercises, let me tell you." Quote.
What?
So he stabbed a German in the stomach. He brought down their lieutenant, and then somebody shot him in the arm, and then he stabbed that guy in the ribs.
Oh my god.
And then somebody climbed onto his back, so he stabbed that guy in the ribs too.
Holy shit.
Then Johnson grabs his friend and drags his friend back away from the Germans, who retreated.
Oh my god.
Holy shit.
They're like, wait a minute, hold on. All those grenades, all those gunshots that, knocked down half of our guys. And then this guy, that was all this guy. That was all this one guy. And now he's coming at me with a knife. Never mind. Auf Wiedersehen.
Yeah. So, it's at this point that the French and the American forces showed up.
And they're like, well, where did everybody go?
He's like, you're a little late to the party, guys.
So, when the reinforcements arrived, Johnson just passed out.
Yeah.
I would too.
Yeah.
He was taken to a field hospital, and by daylight, they were able to see what he had done. He had killed 4 Germans, and he had wounded 10 to 20 others.
Oh my god.
He himself had suffered 21 wounds during hand-to-hand combat and from
Oh.
bullets. And he had single-handedly prevented the Germans from coming through the French line.
Can you fucking imagine?
A legend.
God.
Yeah. So Johnson said about his amazing feat, he says, quote, "There wasn't anything fine about it." He says, quote, "I just fought for my life. A rabbit would have done that." Quote.
Buddy, no.
Sure.
Do not undersell
You are
yourself.
not giving yourself enough credit, dude.
Sir.
Like, oh my god. You saved your friend. Did his friend survive?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, his friend survived.
You saved your friend and yourself and the whole French line. Like, dude. A rabbit could have done that.
Like my dude? No.
No, a rabbit could not. A rabbit could never. Oh man. I can't even imagine the adrenaline, the fear, the pressure, the
terror.
There's just only so much that fighting for your life is going to do for you in any situation. But, like 20 to 20, 25 German people shooting at you and throwing grenades at you, fear and adrenaline is not going to do that.
yeah. Like, oh my god.
You just lived up to the name Hellfighter.
Yeah. Seriously.
So later, the entire French force lined up to see the two Americans receive their decorations. They received something called, I believe, the Croix de Guerre, which is France's highest military honor. They're the first American privates to ever receive it. Johnson's medal included the coveted Gold Palm for extraordinary valor. In February of 1919, the Harlem Hellfighters returned to New York for a parade up Fifth Avenue, where thousands lined up to cheer for a regiment that had amassed a record of bravery and achievement. They called him the Black Death.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So among the nearly 3,000 troops was him, just this little man, who led the procession from like the front of it. He was promoted to sergeant, and he stood in the lead car, which was an open top Cadillac, waving a handful of red lilies while everybody chanted his nickname. Here's a little picture of him doing that.
Love it. Love it.
Amazing.
Yeah,
It's a parade.
yeah, and it was like miles long. Upon his discharge, the Army used Johnson's image to recruit new soldiers and to sell victory war stamps. And the quote that they used to do that was, "Henry Johnson licked a dozen Germans. How many stamps have you licked?"
Okay.
All right.
Former President Theodore Roosevelt called Johnson one of the, quote, 5 bravest Americans to serve in World War I, and by the mid-1920s, Johnson's difficulties, though, were catching up to him, and so his physical health declined because he was shot and stabbed and stuff a bunch of times.
Right.
His discharge records Here's the sad part. His discharge records erroneously made no mention of his injuries, so Johnson was denied not only a Purple Heart, but a disability allowance as well when he returned.
What the
What
fuck?
the
So
fuck?
he was uneducated and in his early 20s. Henry Johnson, he had no expectations that he could correct the errors on his military records. He just tried to carry on as well as a black man could in the country he had been willing to give his life for. Um, so he made it back home to Albany, New York, and resumed his job as a red cap porter at the train station that he had been working at before. But he just could not overcome his injuries. His left foot had been shattered, and he had a metal plate that was holding it together. And his inability to hold down a job because of his injuries meant that he like started drinking really heavily, and his wife and his 3 children left him because of his difficulties that he was facing, and then he died really poor in 1929 at age 32, which is very sad.
Oh my god.
That's awful.
As far as anybody knew, it's okay, I'm going to turn it around. As far as anyone knew, he was buried in a pauper's field in Albany. So his son, Herman, none of that was surprising to Herman. Herman was well aware of what life in the US for a black man was like at the time. Herman went on to join the famous Tuskegee Airmen.
Oh.
In
Whoa.
Yeah, in 2001, 72 years after Henry Johnson's death, a really great, very unlikely mystery was revealed to his son Herman. So, on July 5th, 1929, Henry Johnson had not been buried in an anonymous pauper's grave in Albany.
Okay.
Historians did not forget what Johnson did in the forest of Argonne back in 1918. In 1996, President Bill Clinton posthumously awarded Henry Johnson the Purple Heart, for one thing.
Thank you.
A little late,
And-
but okay.
Fucking time.
Yeah, and once Johnson's place of burial had been located, not in a pauper's grave, but in the Arlington National Cemetery,
Oh.
In 2001, the Army awarded him the Distinguished Service Cross, which is the nation's second highest military decoration.
That's good, at least.
So, in recent years, a chain of command endorsement in the form of a memo from General John J. Pershing, Commander in Chief of the American Expeditionary Force during World War I, written just days after Johnson's heroics in the Argonne, was discovered in an online database by an aide to Senator Charles Schumer of New York. Schumer believes that this endorsement, which was not known to exist for nearly a century, will be enough to bestow another posthumous award on the man. He says, "There's no doubt," Schumer said that while he was like standing at Johnson's grave, that he should receive the Medal of Honor, which is the highest military honor.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Herman was told that his father was buried in Arlington, and that not only was he buried at Arlington's National Cemetery, but that he was buried there with ceremony and with full honors.
Oh, well, that's
It's just sad that his family didn't really know.
yeah.
Yeah. And Herman said, "Learning my father was buried in this place of national honor can be described in just one word: joyful." And that's what he said as he stood at his father's grave in 2002. "I am simply joyful," he said.
I'm not gonna cry.
So, those are three amazing people during our country's early history. Not the earliest, but early history, who did amazing things and who were instrumental in some key moments during two of our big wars.
Mm-hmm.
And without them, we couldn't have done some of the big things that this country did.
Yeah.
So thank you for existing, Henry Johnson and Mary Jane Richards and Robert Smalls.
Yeah. They helped build this country, made us what we are today. We can only build up. And I hope that, we just continue to get better.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the first episode of our Black History Month celebration. So, as always, we would love if you guys would send us questions at whywouldyouskthat.com. There's a little form for you to fill out there, or you can email them to us at whywouldyouskthatpod@gmail.com. Alternatively, you could always, scream to the heavens and pray, and we might just answer you. In other news, would you guys kindly do us a solid and rate and review and comment wherever you find us? I don't know where allows you to do these things, but do it, please.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, please leave those reviews. If you like what we do, we could really use the reviews because it's the reviews that get the word out about our podcast and get other people listening so we can keep doing what we're doing.
And listen, y'all, we really enjoy doing what we're doing. And we're hoping we're getting some knowledge out there, dropping some knowledge. All right, good night, everybody.
Good night.